All right. How are we doing? Shall we move on to myth number 2? All right, let's continue. This one is a really interesting one as well. And this one comes up a lot. All right, myth number 2. Okay, I'm going to launch the next poll. Imagine yourself 10 years from today. 10 years from today. So where are we? 2023. Think 2033. That number is even hard to say, right? It's so far ahead. I'm sure many of us have not thought about it, but think about it for a moment and think about where you would be in 10 years. And here's my question to you. How different would you be 10 years from today? Would it be A, not very different, B, somewhat different, or C, very different? All right, keep the answers coming in the chat. All right. Okay, what do we have here? Let's see what we have here. Okay, I see a few C's. I see B's, somewhat different. I'd like to believe very different, but subconsciously I feel somewhat different. All right, between B and C. All right, depends a few ways. All right. Okay, thank you. Now let's not look into the future. Let's look back. Okay, let's go back. We've all come quite a distance. Here we are. Here all of you are on this morning, spending time and intentionally creating the space for yourself where you can reflect on your journey so far and where you could potentially go next. Think about 10 years ago. So what would that be? 2013. Can you all recollect where you were in 2013? Where were you in your career? Where were you in your life? And how were you? Same question. How were you 10 years ago? Were you somewhat different? Mostly the same? Or very different? All right. Very different. Okay. Just looking at the average here, most of you are saying very different. So just keep that in mind. And let's talk about this. So most of us, when we think about the rate of change we can see in our lives, we think surely the rate of change has to taper off at some point. We look at children, and for all those of you who are mothers, we see phenomenal changes in our children from one year to the next. I have a 7-year-old who's going to be 8 next week, and it's just ridiculous the kinds of changes I've seen in him over the years. And then we look at ourselves and then we think, well, I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s now. Okay, now I'm in my 40s. All right, I think pretty much done. I think I'm pretty much set in my ways. I have a certain kind of personality. I don't see my personality really changing much. I have really put a lot of thought behind becoming who I am. So maybe I don't even want to change much. And so we reach a point when we think, okay, I think I'm done changing. This is who I'm going to continue to be next year, the year after that, the year after that, the year after that. Okay, some changes here and there, but for the most part, the core of me is not going to change. Now, if that's what you are thinking, you are partly correct and partly not correct. Now, here is where you are correct. Yes, the rate of change does decline, it does taper off, but, and here is the good news, it does not decline as much as we think it does. In fact, most people, majority of people underestimate the kind and level of change they can expect in their life at any stage, at any age. And if you don't believe me, take a look at this next graph. So this comes from the work of Daniel Gilbert, who is another great researcher out of Harvard. And here he's citing a study that was done, asking people the same question I asked you. How much change do you expect over the next 10 years? And then 10 years later, in this case, they asked those same people, what is the level of change you saw in your life over the last 10 years? And guess what? Do you even see it? Can you even see on the graph the difference in what they actually thought? The purple line is what they thought is the level of change they would see in their lives. And then you see the actual change, the yellow line, significantly above. So at every age, we are severely underestimating how much change is really possible for us. And what's fascinating is this is across multiple variables. Change, you can look at change in values. Even our values change over time, maybe not as much as you would expect, but they do, because our circumstances shape us in all kinds of ways. And our lives, the things that happen in our lives, do influence us. There is a change in our personality. There is a change in our preferences. The music that you like today may not be the exact music you like 10 years later. The kind of food you like today is maybe not the kind of food you will like 10 years later. There are changes across all levels, and at every level, as you can see, everyone across the board, we underestimate. And this is what Daniel Gilbert calls the end of history illusion that we all have. We think when we reach, especially when we start hitting our 30s and our 40s, that we're done. This is who I am, and this is who I'm going to continue to be. But as he says, human beings are works in progress, whose work is never done. This work is never done. We're never finished. And the person who you are right now is as transient, as fleeting, as temporary as all the people you have ever been in your life before. The only constant in our lives is change. Now, why is it important to talk about this? Because if we don't think we're going to change much from here on forth, well, what happens? Well, the first thing is we don't even allow ourselves to dream in a certain way, because we think, that couldn't be possible for me. I mean, no, that's not me. That's not who I am. I couldn't do that. And then we miss out on opportunities, and we stick to certain paths in our life, in our career. We say no to other career paths or other options or other ways of being and showing up, because at first it feels uncomfortable, and we don't think over time we will change. This is why we say no to let's say a job opportunity for which we don't feel 100% qualified. And it leads to regret, it leads to frustration, it leads to a lot of disappointment, as you can imagine. And that's when we feel like it's time to reinvent myself. It's time to reinvent. But if we are going to reinvent, we first have to bust this myth that not just small amount of change, but that exceptional change is not possible for you, because it is. Case in point, when I asked you, how different were you 10 years ago? A majority of you said you were very different. So you already know your life can change you, can shape you, can influence you to a great, great, great extent. You are all, most of you are very different today than you were 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, had I asked that version of you, can you even imagine yourself being who you are today? You would have said, you would have struggled. You would be like, I don't know if I can be that. But here you are, and you are all of that. And the reason why so many of you, or the vast majority of you, did not say you're going to be very different 10 years from today, is because it is hard for us to look ahead. It's easier to look back and see hindsight as being 2020. It's hard to look ahead and think, gosh, where could I be? But to that I say, that is just a failure of imagination. It's not a failure of possibility. It's just a failure of imagination. And that, my friends, is something we can solve for. And we are going to solve for that when we talk about how can we, keeping this in mind, reinvent ourselves. So, second myth, busted. Who you are is not who you will always be. And this is an important one. This is an important myth to bust for your reinvention. All right, are we ready to bust more myths? Are we ready to bust more myths?
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to